with the Duke Blue Devils and what they were very, very close to getting up and into the big dance. But to cover all of that, JJ Jackson now joins us here on the show. Unfortunately, JJ, not the finish that, Duke fans wanted initially, but it was a hell of a ride for the most part because of the fact of we're probably going to end up watching the number one best prospect be drafted potentially to the Dallas Mavericks and Cooper Flagg. I will say, watching college basketball, and I paid so closely attention to the Duke Blue Devils for a few reasons. Number one is you are now moving into a new regime past Coach Mike Krzyzewski, and I wasn't sure how, the chemistry of the entire starting five and even with the roster as a whole was going to look like, because even when North Carolina moved on from Roy Williams, this was another interesting one. But I have vastly been impressed with what Duke did this year. So how did you really break down this season? Because especially when you move on from one of the most legendary college basketball coaches I've ever seen in my life to now being the team that almost got this close into the big dance last year.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knew what to expect when you talk about this Duke basketball team and Coach K taking over. I mean, 42 years on the job. It's longer than my entire lifetime. It's longer than so many lifetimes of current players that are on the squad, guys in the NBA. Like, all you knew was being able to associate Duke basketball with Mike Krzyzewski. And now here we are, 3 seasons concluded with Jon Scheyer being the head coach, and it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. You're starting to feel like, okay, this is what to expect. And so much of it is the same. I love the way that Duke went after the hiring process of naming Jon Scheyer the coach and waiting for an entire season before Coach K retired so he could start to build together his top recruiting class. He was able to get in early on Cooper Flagg as a prospect. The guy played for Team USA in the select camp before the Olympics, before he ever even played a game of college basketball. And then they're able to come together and put together a 35-4 season, running all the way to the Final Four. Truly, truly impressed with what Duke got done this season.
So, going back to that game that initially ended Duke's season, going back to the play, because to me personally, what I thought of when I saw it several times is Cooper was obviously trying to get a hold of the ball. He was trying to keep the possession up and on his side. But you and I both know, especially when it comes to, crunch time, most of the time the whistles are swallowed. They're never, ever usually called. But in that case up from there, I mean, it changed the trajectory. But I think at the same time, too, I'm not sure you would agree with me, but sometimes I say this all the time with teams. If you get put into this position, there was a reason why you got put into that position. And I look at beforehand that they had a lead. It seemed like things were up and under control, and then they kind of slipped a little bit, and then they ended up coming in this close to where that crucial call on Cooper Flagg really changed the trajectory of that. When you saw that play, I mean, what was kind of going through your head? I mean, there was just some of those things that I was like, there was some things that Duke could have done better up and into that position that led up to the play that they would have never have even had to deal with that, and they would have gotten that trip to the Natty.
Yeah, Jake, certainly in the weeks and days that followed, I talked about this game ad nauseum over on Locked On Blue Devils. I've tried my best to forget all of the specific details of that loss to Houston in the Final Four because it just pains me so much and you're just so close to winning the whole thing. But unfortunately, so much of it is still with me. At the end of the day, you made the point right there. Duke had a 6-point lead with 32 seconds left. You put yourself in the position to have your season end in heartbreak like that. This Duke basketball team only made one shot from the floor in the last 9 minutes of the game in a Final Four game. One shot. That's all they did. A Cooper Flagg corner three-pointer with 2.5 minutes left. And by the way, this is historically the most efficient offense that college basketball has seen, and you can't score down the stretch there. Credit to Houston for their physicality and toughness there. At the end of the game, Duke got a pull-up jumper from Cooper Flagg that he makes a million times, and it just so happened not to fall for him there, and the season comes crashing down to a close. So all Duke can do in a loss like that is look at themselves in the mirror, and now as the days have followed, I think they're being more appreciative of the year that they had in totality. But certainly when you break down the last 9 minutes of basketball we saw from this team that will have all 5 players drafted. 3 starters will be top 10 lottery picks. It's going to hurt that they weren't able to cut the nets down and win the whole thing.
So I think all of us as basketball fans, we're so lucky for a few reasons because of the fact of like we get a chance to watch a lot of the top tier basketball programs that I remember even growing up as a kid, that we've seen a lot of great players that have come from this very program. And I think a lot of that is because they're all associated from the project, the protege of Coach K. But I think we're about to witness, Cooper Flagg potentially into Dallas. When I look at Duke and after the season they had last year and watching Cooper Flagg now move on to the NBA, are there any particular players that go and they look at this situation and go, I got to be that next guy to help to set the tone so our whole team could run this baby back and then we could eventually get back in there and get the natty for the next up and coming season? Is there anybody that you could think of on this roster from top to bottom that comes to mind that could really fill in the hole that Cooper Flagg left behind there in the program?
Yeah, the Cooper Flagg size hole is going to be filled in by Cameron Boozer, who's a true freshman coming in this upcoming season, one of the top players in the entire country. His twin brother, Caden, will also be joining him on the team. And, of course, their dad was an NBA All-Star and had a very successful career playing at Duke himself, and Carlos Boozer, a part of the 2001 national championship team. So Cameron Boozer is going to lead the way for Duke this upcoming year. But where Duke stands out amongst the rest of college basketball is that they are one of only 3 teams in the entire country. And keep in mind, there are over 350 Division I teams in college basketball. Duke is one of only 3 that did not have a single player enter the transfer portal. They were able to retain so much of their roster that had eligibility left. Like I said, a couple of guys graduated. They are going to have 5 starters drafted into the NBA level, so you've got to replace them. But nobody said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go find a larger paycheck. They want to come back. And that starts with Isaiah Evans and Caleb Foster for Duke in the backcourt. Those are going to be 2 big pieces next season.
So I had the pleasure of talking with a fellow person in the industry with, covering the NIL and the transfer portal. And, to me, what I love about, college football as a whole is that, the transfer portal in the NIL, it's a new dawn of age in college football to where we're getting used to this thing. We're trying to make it all consistent. But the loving matter of this is that they have such a strong relationship between college and in the pros. And the part of that is because we get the chance to look at these players for about 3 to 4 years max. And they're ready to be day one starters, or they're ready to contribute on a 53-man roster any way that they can. When I look at basketball, it's an interesting situation for a few reasons, because now we're seeing with the NIL that it's allowing college players now to stay another couple extra years to gain the momentum and gain the experience from it. And when I look at Duke, because to me as a top tier program, much like North Carolina and your Houstons and even your Floridas, when I look at a lot of these other teams, and I've watched this growing up, my birthday's right up and around in March, so I get excited for the tournament. But the thing is that I think we're coming into an age we're not going to be seeing a ton of these Cinderella story programs. Okay. Like growing up as a 90s kid, we've always been used to one hit wonder music. And so I elaborate that with these Cinderella programs, because when will they ever start to, when will I ever see Wichita State again? Right. When will I ever see Loyola Chicago? So I think a lot of that is because with this transfer portal in NIL and basketball, it's going to challenge a lot of these, not going to say bottom, but they're basically these smaller market programs that they know that they've really got to compete and go get up to the challenge that these top tier programs. How have you evaluated the NIL? Because especially with a top tier program like Duke, they're kind of sitting there up and into the driver's seat, but they also are thinking about, well, we do have some of these players that if we don't have them starting up and into these rotations all season long, these guys could be up and out the door, and we're going to be now brewing up the next products for the next few years, especially with our recruitments, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly starts with the money that these guys are able to earn at this level. I mean, there's a reason, Jake, you look in the NIL era, there's a reason UConn won back-to-back national championships and went on a historic run that we really hadn't seen before since 91 and 92 Duke, since 06, 07 Florida, winning back-to-back titles like that because UConn was able to hold on to so many of their key pieces on title teams. At a program like Duke, when you've got top 10 picks each and every year, when you've got the number one pick, you're banking on your next freshman class to be as good as the previous one was. But now what you're able to do is that those fringe draft pick players who earlier might go test the waters, might stay in the draft and hope to be selected in the second round, realize they're actually going to make more money to stay at Duke and to play for a bigger program than in the G League, right? I mean, when you think about the Santa Cruz Warriors or the Mad Ants or all of these crazy G League teams that you've got out there, they're not getting the viewership that Duke is. So why not stay in college basketball, play for the biggest brand that there is in the sport, and continue to improve your game to be ready to be a higher draft pick at the next level and make more money?
Yeah, and it's interesting because especially when I look at these players, my problem with this is that I don't see these players enter into their peaks until year 3, year 4 in the league. And so it's like G League in the ways doesn't quite, help with some of these builds because you're also getting a lot of these international stars and they're all playing overseas. So I just think that there's that kind of complication in itself. But if they can honestly, if we get basketball players, coming back up and into college and at least play a max of at least 3, because I look at the Steph Currys, what he did up in Dayton. I look at, the Klay Thompsons and even the Draymonds. They stay another extra year up in college so that they can be prepared for that. Because, I mean, you're talking the whole plethora, shoe deals, endorsements, sponsorships, all that stuff, even for an 18-year-old kid. That's a lot of money that they're going to have to handle, but that's where the agents, you're hoping they could at least handle it the best way possible for these kids to have a positive future down the road.
No doubt. And that's something that I think will continue to improve in the years to come as we get more used to this. And so many things are going to change when July 1st hits, and we officially are going to be able to see the House settlement come to play, and universities are able to pay their athletes directly. But thinking about guys waiting a couple of years to make an impact in the NBA, certainly the case for so many guys across the board. However, what Duke has been so successful at doing is that their pitch is that you could play right away once you get to the league, because we will see Cooper Flagg be the number one pick this year in the NBA draft. I only have to take you back 2 years to Paolo Banchero being the number one pick in the NBA draft out of Duke. And let me go a few years before that. A guy by the name of Zion Williamson did not need to keep playing college basketball. He was ready to go to the NBA. Cooper Flagg's going to go to the Dallas Mavericks. Who's their point guard? Kyrie Irving, who was the number one pick in the 2011 draft out of Duke, right? Like, the program that Coach K built and Jon Scheyer has been able to continue to take to the next step is so ready to get guys prepared for professional basketball.
Yeah, I'm excited. This year really gave me a lot to where we're seeing a lot of more of these top tier programs. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, it's rigged, it's outrageous. I'm like, come on, dude. If you don't have, I'm like, I'm not going to sit there up and on the television and just be ranting and raving about Loyola Chicago or Wichita State, because then I'd be an idiot for saying so up and on the radio. Chase would probably smack me across the screen. But, I'm here to watch the Dukes. I'm here to watch the UConns and the North Carolinas. So an interesting one to ask you on this, because we know that the draft coming up a couple of days up from here going to be interesting. But here's my thing. I live here in Denver, Colorado, and I've said it even before I started the show. I said everything that, even with us being in the sports industry, nothing ever that happens in sports ever should be a coincidence. My biggest thing is that living here in Denver, we're so used to scratch tickets. We have the lottery tickets, just like other states. To me, I can't stand this NBA lottery draft. I really can't. And then, everybody's all thinking it's rigged and all this. Well, think about this. You mentioned about a Duke alumni who obviously went number one overall after LeBron James left to go to Miami, and he lands up in Cleveland.
Right.
And then you think about, Zion going to New Orleans after they just moved off from Anthony Davis. And then all of a sudden, it's like you also see the Spurs. They had all their greats retire, and then they get Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
This cannot be coincidental when you start seeing a team that just traded away their star player in Luka Doncic to the Lakers, and then they get the number 1 overall pick, potentially Cooper Flagg. Like 14% that there were teams that were highly able to get the number 1 overall pick, and then all of a sudden the Mavs literally had a 0.3 higher percent chance than in the NHL lottery draft and the New York Islanders getting the number 1 overall pick. Like, this is not coincidental. And then I look at this like a scratch ticket. And so a lot of these teams that are trying to quote unquote tank, they won't be able to because they'll end up landing the 11th or in the 15th.
Yeah.
Like, how have you evaluated that? And even with when it collaborates with a lot of these collegiate stars going into the pros, because these franchises, they just want a future star player, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's what they're built on. And so when you can find a star that's been prepared for the stardom at a school like Duke, that's somebody that you're certainly excited for. A historic franchise in the Boston Celtics find themselves with the number 3 pick in 2017, and who falls into their hands? Then Duke's very own Jason Tatum, who's ready to take over and lead them to, so we've seen this before. Jake, I'll tell you, here at Duke, right down the road in Charlotte, North Carolina, we've got the Hornets, who had the best odds with the Utah Jazz to win the lottery and win the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. So here in North Carolina, the state thinks that Cooper's going to move from Durham to Charlotte and stay in the state playing for the Hornets. But clearly the lottery had other plans.
Yeah, man. I just couldn't even believe it. And the immense amount of just rage bait of it being rigged was just like, I just had to laugh, because it's like, this is just not even a coincidence. We've seen this before. It's been, I would think it's happened 6 times at least that I can remember recalling it. But yeah, I just thought it was just really, really interesting. A final note before letting you go, talk to me about this coach, because I felt like I haven't really dived in to a lot of like his backstory, but because I'm so used to just watching Coach K and his greatness and all the rest of it. So to fill in that role, like, what should I expect, at least just from the protection of just, the program in itself, what they've always stood for, they strive for every single year, and then building the future products that just make up for why Duke is such great basketball?
Yeah, Duke is certainly a no problem. They're in a really great spot with Jon Scheyer as the head coach. He just finished his 3rd season on the job with 90 wins in his first 3 years. That's the record in the sport, by the way, for the most wins ever in your first 3 years on the job. So clearly this was set up for success. Jon Scheyer, a guy who played for Coach K, he played for Duke. He was the starting point guard on their 2010 national championship team, who, talk about underdogs, talk about Cinderellas. Remember, that team nearly lost to Butler on Gordon Hayward's half-court heave, and Jon Scheyer was the star guard for Duke that was able to get the win there. So he's got the number 1 recruiting class once again coming in this year. He's going to continue to do that year by year. So Duke's going to be fine. They're going to continue to compete for ACC championships, and hopefully they'll be able to win their 6th national championship sometime soon. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Boy, wouldn't that be something? Appreciate you for coming on by here, JJ. Where can everybody look up and tap in here with all of our audiences to get them locked in on Duke Blue Devil basketball and more?
Yeah, absolutely. Football season will be right around the corner, so I'll have plenty of college football thoughts there for Duke. Manny Diaz getting set for his 2nd season as the head coach. Exciting things there for the Blue Devils. It's Locked On Blue Devils wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Be sure to check us out.
All righty, JJ. Appreciate you for stopping on by, giving your insights, man. And strap on in, sit up on the couch, get some popcorn while you're at it before we start to get ready for the draft, and watch Cooper Flagg take that number 1 overall pick, man. Appreciate you for coming on by. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Chase, I mean, look, I'm getting it just as excited about, Cooper Flagg being the number 1 overall pick. I mean, that's just, it has to be obvious.